When Luis leaned close and whispered those 8 words, it felt like someone had cracked the foundation of everything I Sept ever built. He put something inside your juice. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Friday, August 31st, 2018, Charleston, South Carolina. It's a warm night, the kind where the air hangs thick and sweet, and the bistro windows fog at the edges like they're holding in a secret. The trio by the window is sliding through autumn in New York, even though we're still in summer. The brass notes are lazy, like the city itself. I'm at my usual corner, two top, the one with the nick in the oak from the night 15-year-old Ethan insisted he could open a wine bottle himself. The smell of rosemary and seared butter drifts from the kitchen. The lights are low, soft. This was built with hands that loved it. Ethan excuses himself. Quick call, Dad. Jade needs a second. He disappears through the side door into the narrow brick alley that smells of lemon peel and night rain. His phone is already rising to his ear as he goes. That Seps when Luis leans in. He doesn't touch me. Luis never touches. He just bends close enough that his breath mixes with the hum of the bass line. His voice is steady, almost gentle. He puts something inside your juice. It lands like a hammer on wet concrete. Quiet but final. Luis straightens without another word, folds a bar towel, and walks on like he just asked about dessert. I stare at the drink. A tall plastic cup, our Whitlock Bistro logo stamped across it. Grapefruit spritz, pale gold under the pendant light. I drink it every summer night. The straw rests against the lid, innocent. But the surface isn't right. There's a thin, cloudy bloom floating just beneath the ice, like the beginning of a bruise. The kitchen bell dings. Someone chops onions in back. Jazz keeps playing. Everything is ordinary except the foundation of my life has tilted 2 degrees to the left. Where? I murmur as Luis loops back, towel over his shoulder. Service station, he says. Low, right hand, small paper packet, on camera. Want the blue? The blue is our tamper-evident bag. Triton safe pack. Serial strip, dateline, clear seal. We use them for cash drops after close. Old construction habits never left me. You protect what you build. I nod once. Luis moves like water. He grabs a bag, sets it down next to the cup without looking at me. TSP 48,219. That number glows under the light like a lighthouse. He places a pen and a tear-off slip beside it. The jazz hushes between songs. I write, August 31st, 2018, 9:43 p.m., Whitlock Bistro, Table 2. Each letter lands like a nail in a plank. Sir? A soft voice on my right. A woman at the next table, kind eyes. Hospital badge half tucked. I septum and RN, if you want a witness signature. The world hasn't spun completely off its axis yet. It's holding on by this woman's steady voice and a pen stroke. I nod. She signs the slip. Secaline, RN, writes the time again. 9:43 p.m. Precise, like she's charting morphine. I slide a bar towel beneath the cup. Lift it carefully, not touching the lid, not disturbing the cloud. The bag crackles as it swallows the drink whole. The seal folds down. Clicks. Tamper strip bleeds red like a warning line. I press it flat with the heel of my hand. The cup disappears behind blue plastic. I slip the tear-off receipt into my wallet where I used to keep Ethan's Little League photo. The alley door opens. Ethan returns glowing with something. Maybe the night, maybe the call, maybe the thrill of the move he just made. He sits across from me like nothing has happened. His hair's damp from humidity. His smile's practiced. But his eyes aren't smiling. Sorry, Dad, he says too casually. Jade needed to check on something. How sips the spritz? I raise the new cup. Luis quietly placed earlier. Sweet I lie. Hot night. He leans back. Talks about expanding the patio this fall, knocking down the lattice I've hated since day one, maybe hosting weddings. He uses the word real estate like it's a magic spell. He doesn't know that word is a knife to me now. We danced through safe conversation, bookings, the HVAC finally fixed, the Charleston Gazette possibly covering our 15-year anniversary. He's always been good at charm, his mother gave him that. But underneath the rhythm of his words, there's a pulse, an edge. Luis passes by with empty glasses like nothing's happening. His shoulders are square, but his eyes sweep the floor like a man marking exits. I know that stance. We've both worked construction. You learn to tell when a wall is about to crack. Ethan's fingers shake a little when he sets his phone down. It's small, almost invisible, but I've spent 30 years watching people's hands on job sites. The hands always tell you first. I was thinking, he says, softening his voice. We make the bistro modern. Sell a piece, reinvest, you know. Jade says, my chest goes cold. Jade says, not Ethan thinks. I let him talk, the way you let a man finish tying his own noose.
I set proud of you.
I say finally, and I am, just not for this. We close at 11. I sign credit slips, initial a comp for a burned tart. My signature feels foreign on the paper. Ethan hugs me goodbye in the doorway, smelling like expensive cologne and cheap confidence. You good, Dad? He asks. Yeah, I say. Drive safe. When the trio packs their instruments, the alley air has cooled, heavy with salt. I walk to my truck with the briefcase in one hand and the blue bag in the other. The sealed cup rests in the passenger footwell like a heartbeat. Charleston at night isn't quiet. It breathes. Streetlights warm the cobblestones. Porch fans click on King Street. The truck hums beneath me, steady, loyal. I drive down Wentworth slow. Every bump in the road is a hammer tapping that brick Ethan pressed when he was 14. This place is ours, Dad. I hear his younger voice clear as the night air. At the red light by the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, I take the tear-off receipt from my wallet, uncap the console pen, and underline the date once hard. August 31st, 2018. When you've built your life out of concrete rebar and sweat, you learn truth lives in paper. Lies crumble. Paper doesn't. I park at the house. Basil on the back steps. A porch light I wired myself 20 years ago. Inside, it's quiet. The way it only gets quiet when something's waiting in the air. I set the briefcase on the butcher block counter my wife loved. For a moment I just rest my hand on the wood. Feel its history. Our history. The blue bag stays zipped. The seal glows under the kitchen pendant. A single moth taps the window pane. The night feels like it's holding its breath with me. Tomorrow, I tell myself, preserve, verify, act. That's how you take back what's yours. Not with rage, not with fists. With paper, with patience, with truth. I turn off the light. The kitchen falls into darkness, except for the glint off the bag's silver strip. It's quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before a storm, not the kind you fear, the kind you build for. And somewhere in that silence, I hear it again, the clink of ice. The sound of the night, everything changed. The house was still holding its breath when I woke up the next morning, Saturday, September 1st, 2018. The sky over Charleston had that pale, washed-out look it gets before the heat rolls in. I've always liked mornings like that, quiet, no eyes on me, just the hum of the old refrigerator and the smell of basil drifting in through the screen door. The blue evidence bag sat on the kitchen counter exactly where I'd left it. The tamper strip was still tight. No warping, no lift. Luis taught me a long time ago. If someone wants to steal something, they touch what they shouldn't. It's not just what's missing that tells the story. It's what's different. I pulled out a clean set of nitrile gloves from the top drawer. Old habit. I've been in construction my whole life. Gloves aren't paranoia, they're protection. I picked up the bag gently, feeling the condensation inside, the weight of the melted ice, and I whispered something I've never said out loud before. God help me if I am right about this. I moved to the garage freezer. The big chest one I bought in 2005 when business first started to turn around. That freezer has held Sunday roasts, anniversary cakes, and venison from old hunting trips. But that morning it held something heavier than food. I slid the bag inside, right between a block of frozen brisket and an old gallon of ice cream, Ethan loved when he was a kid. It felt poetic. It felt wrong. I set my old Fluke IR thermometer on the lid, read the temp, minus 2.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Good. Chain of custody starts with temperature. Nobody can say it's spoiled. Nobody can say it was tampered with. Then I opened the small spiral notebook I've kept in the top drawer since 1998, when we poured the bistro's first foundation. My handwriting isn't pretty, but it's steady. Chain log entry hash 001, September 1st, 6:41 a.m. Cup placed in freezer, TSP 48,219 intact. Sealed by witness at 9:43 p.m. previous night. Temp logged. You don't build something worth $1 million without learning to leave paper behind you like breadcrumbs. One day it can save you or bury someone else. Tuesday, September 4th, 2018, 8:17 a.m. I pulled into Roper St. Francis Hospital lab wing, the evidence bag in a clean cooler, double-zipped. It felt wrong carrying something my son had touched like it was toxic waste. But right and wrong had already swapped places the night Luis whispered. I checked in under my own name. No police yet, no drama. Just paperwork, controlled, quiet. The nurse behind the desk, a woman named Helen, looked at the bag and then at me with the kind of cautious respect you give someone who's either very careful or very dangerous. Chain of custody? She asked. I slid the spiral open to the page. Signed here, logged here, no breaks. Initials on seal. Time recorded. Temp log inside. She nodded, slipped the bag into their intake protocol, and printed the barcode, specimen ID 22,914 RSF08. I initialed. She initialed. Her supervisor initialed. Clean. Expected turnaround is 48 hours, she said. You settle, get a secure call. I thanked her, walked out. My hands shook for the first time in years. Not fear, not yet, just the weight of what was starting to take shape. 2 days later, Wednesday, September 6th, 11:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. Roper St. Francis. Lab tech on the other end. Male voice, careful tone. Mr. Whitlock, this is lab services. We can confirm your full request over the phone, but the substance in the specimen tested positive for zolpidem. It's sepsis sedative. I went very still. Zolpidem, Ambien, a controlled prescription. We'd still have the full toxicology report ready for pickup this afternoon. You still need to sign chain acknowledgement. I thanked him, hung up. Stared at the kitchen wall. For 10 full seconds, the world didn't move. I still remember when Ethan was 16 and stole a six-pack from the bar fridge. I caught him 2 hours later, stumbling in the alley, scared but proud of his rebellion. Back then, his sins fit in a glass bottle, not a tampered cup with a sedative in it. That afternoon, I drove to the hospital, signed the chain documents. They handed me a white evidence envelope with the printed results inside. Toxicology report. Specimen 22,914 RSF08. Date received September 4th, 18. Compound detected. Zolpidem tartrate. 12.4 mg cell. Status positive. Chain verified by H. Lawson, RN, MS Eckers Tech, ER Whitlock, owner. I slipped the envelope into my briefcase. That old briefcase now held two things: the original deed of my restaurant, and proof my son tried to drug me. I wasn't prepared for the second blow that came 3 days later. Saturday morning, September 8th, 9:22 a.m. The envelope from Southern Atlantic Bank. It looked ordinary, thin white paper. Window for my name, but when I slid it open with the old brass knife my wife gave me, the words felt like a blow to the chest. Notice of payment delinquency, commercial loan account, hash 448,397,102, amount $480,000. Origination date, March 21st, 2016. Signatory, Ethan Whitlock, power of attorney. I dropped the letter on the counter and just stared at it. March 2016. I wasn't signing anything in March 2016. I was on a ventilator at Roper St. Francis after the bypass surgery. I remember the beeping of the machines, the cold light, the way Ethan held my hand and whispered, "You still gonna be fine, Dad. I got you." He got me all right. got me right where he wanted me. The world went quiet around me, only the hum of the fridge. Then something sharp and clean entered my chest. Not pain, focus. I went down to the basement that afternoon to the old fireproof cabinet where I keep every major document. Tax returns, business deeds, insurance. I pulled the file labeled 2016, Medical POA, and there it was. A power of attorney form, notarized March 19th, 2016. My signature or something close to it, scrawled across the bottom. Ethan's printed name beside mine. The signature wasn't mine. Not the way I write it. A forger can fake strokes, but not rhythm. My rhythm lives in my bones. I sat on the cold floor and stared at it until the daylight through the basement window shifted from yellow to orange. That sets when it hit me. This wasn't set a one-night betrayal. This was a plan. 3 years of groundwork, forged authority, loans in my name, and now a sedative in my drink. By Monday, September 10th, I copied the toxicology report 3 times and placed each in a separate safe location. One in my fireproof cabinet, one in my bank SIP's safety deposit box, one in Nora Jacobs' SIP's sealed accounting file. Evidence breathes better when it has witnesses. I also printed the bank statement showing the delinquent loan, highlighted the date of origination, and clipped it to the POA copy with a steel binder. No one touches the originals. Originals win courtrooms. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even call Ethan. Because when someone shows you they've drawn a map to steal your life, your job isn't to scream. Your job is to turn their map into a trap. This was no longer just about a drink. It was about my legacy. My house, my wife's dream, my name on that deed. And from that morning forward, I made a promise. Ethan would face the truth he built with his own hands. The sedative was just the opening act. Some wars start with gunfire. Mine began with a USB drive wrapped in a brown napkin and slid across the counter like a secret. Friday, October 2nd, 2018, Charleston, South Carolina. The air carried the edge of early fall, just cool enough to make the bistro's wood floors creak louder at night. I'd spent a month building my fortress, quietly. Freezer logs, lab reports, bank letters, copies locked away like loaded magazines. But evidence is only power if you know when to show it, and when to make it breathe in the dark. Luis approached me while I was restocking the bar. No words, he just reached under the towel stack, set down a plain brown napkin, and walked away to fix the alley door hinge like he'd done it 1,000 times. The USB was inside. Slim, black, labeled in Luis's all-caps handwriting, Camera 2, August 31st, 2140. I slipped it into my breast pocket like it was a heartbeat. That night, after close, I sat alone in the office upstairs, the one with the old filing cabinets, and the photo of my wife hanging crooked on the wall. I plugged the USB in. The footage opened with the familiar grainy angle of the service station. 9:41 p.m. Ethan standing there back to the camera. 9:42 p.m. He leans forward, right hand cupped. A small paper packet. A twist. A pour into my drink. A glance over his shoulder. He didn't said even flinch. Didn't said even hesitate. That was what gutted me. The ease. I paused the video, zoomed in on the timestamp, and wrote it down on the same spiral logbook that held the freezer entry. August 31st, 2018, 21 hours, 42 minutes, and 33 seconds. The camera overlay doesn't lie. It's a builder's dream, angles, proof, no emotion. Then I backed up the footage twice. One encrypted copy to the external Seagate drive. One printed frame sequence to photo paper, time-stamped, initialed. I'd learned long ago on job sites, in insurance fights, that when liars panic, they erase. My job was to build something they couldn't burn down. The next morning, October 3rd, 2018, I drove to Claire Monroe's law office on Broad Street. Claire isn't your smiling on a billboard attorney. She's quiet, surgical, lost her own family business to a forged signature years ago. That kind of loss doesn't leave. It just sharpens. She greeted me with a firm handshake. No small talk. You brought something, she said. I placed the envelope on her desk. USB, printed photos, toxicology report, POA copy, loan letter, one brick at a time. She flipped through each page with surgical precision. When she got to the POA, she paused, traced her thumb under my forged signature. They gave him power of attorney while you were under anesthesia, she said softly. I nodded. By the time I woke up, Hesep already signed the bank paperwork. She exhaled slowly. Hesep's seen this play. Hesep's not stupid. Hesep's patient. I know. She closed the folder gently, like a priest closing a Bible. First rule of quiet wars, Mr. Whitlock. You don't set it swing first. You build the cage before they realize their set is a lock. She drafted the list on her legal pad in her sharp, slanted handwriting. Deed transfer bank box. USB toxicologies. Duplicate notarize. Notary log pull for POA. Financial freeze preparation. No confrontation. Make your moves invisible, she said, tapping the pen against the pad. If they smell your hand on this, they settle pivot. She didn't need to tell me twice. My whole life was concrete and steel. You don't win with speed. You win with structure. By October 5th, every original deed was transferred out of the house and into a lockbox at Southern Trust Bank, 2 copies notarized and sealed. I stood in the sterile bank vault room, the cool air biting my skin, and watched the manager slide the envelope into box 214B. He spun the wheel, clicked the lock. That box is under your name only, he confirmed. Only mine, I said. He handed me the key. I didn't put it on my key ring. I slipped it into my sock. Some wars you keep quiet down to the bone. Luis handed me the technician affidavit 3 days later, October 8, certified statement from the security contractor verifying the authenticity of the DVR recording. It wasn't just a video now. It was a legal blade sharpened. Signed, sealed, time-stamped, Luis said. His voice didn't waver. It never does. We've both built things meant to last storms. This was no different. I signed my portion of the chain log entry, added it to the spiral book under the freezer record and toxicology log. Page 3, every line dated. Every initial real, Ethan might have forged my name once, but not this time. October 12th, Friday night, I saw them together again. Ethan and Jade. She was leaning against the bistro bar like she already owned the damn floorboards. Her lipstick matched the wine. Ethan laughed too loudly. My staff pretended not to watch, but you could feel the shift in the room. Jade Latham had that kind of presence. Sharp heels, sharper eyes. A real estate predator in a silk dress. She wasn't here for dinner, she was here to measure. The beams, the light, the future profit. She ran a hand across the bar top like a realtor touching a property she'd already decided was hers. I tightened my towel around my wrist to keep from breaking a glass. Dad, Ethan said, turning to me, Jade thinks the alley could be converted into something incredible. I smiled the way men do when they set your buying time. Does she? Jade smiled back. Not at me, through me. Square footage like this in this district, she said. You such sitting on a gold mine. Gold mine. That word tasted like acid in my mouth. I wiped the bar slowly. I sat sitting on my wife's set stream. For just a split second, her smile flickered. Predators don't like being reminded of ghosts. I nodded at Luis. He met my eyes, just long enough to let me know he'd saved every second of their body language on the side cameras. Quiet wars aren't fought with guns. They're fought with eyes, silence, and paperwork. Back in the office that night, I stared at the old photo of Ethan at 14 holding a trowel too big for his hands. He looked proud, honest. Before the whispers, before the greed, before Jade. I whispered into the empty room, "This is how you want to play, son?" Then I set build better. And I did. By October 20th, every vulnerable piece of my life was locked down. New legal will drafted with Claire Monroe, airtight forfeiture clause. If Ethan or any affiliated party touched the property under false pretenses, all claims reverted to the state for probate challenge. Jade wouldn't get a single brick. By October 27th, the forensic accountant had pulled a preliminary trace of the $480,000. a neat wire into an account under Latham Harbor Ops LLC, tied to Jade's name. I held that paper in my hands and didn't feel shock anymore. Just resolve. I didn't tell Ethan. I didn't call him. I didn't accuse him. I went to work every day, poured drinks, wiped down tables, smiled at tourists, and built a legal war machine behind closed doors. This was my house, my bistro, my legacy. He thought he could walk in and take it. I was going to make him watch it turn to iron around him. On Halloween night, Luis and I sat in the alley after close. The last jazz notes still hung in the air. He handed me a fresh blue bag, empty this time. You know they're going to make their move soon, he said. I know, I answered. You ready? I looked up at the bricks Ethan and I laid 18 years ago. My wife's laugh still lived between them if you listened hard enough. I've been ready since the night he touched that glass. And in the quiet, the war that had already begun grew teeth. There sits a sound I still never forget. It isn't sit, Ethan Sit's voice, or Jade Sit's laugh. It's the sound of a key sliding into a lock that no longer fits. Tuesday, November 1st, 2018. Charleston, South Carolina. The night before, the last customer left at 9:58 p.m. The lights were off by 10:30. By 11 o'clock, the locksmith was there. No fanfare, no chatter, just the smell of cold metal and oil. The bistro's front door, kitchen access, side alley gate, and office, all rekeyed. I signed the invoice at 11:47 p.m. Initials crisp ERW. The locksmith handed me 3 new keys. I handed one to Luis, one to Nora, and kept the third on a separate ring tucked into my right boot. Trust isn't something I give out anymore. It's something I inventory. While he worked, I stood in the doorway and listened to the city. Charleston at midnight is soft palmettos swaying, gulls crying faintly from the harbor, tires rolling distant over cobblestones. But beneath it all, I could feel the quiet hum of the walls tightening. My walls, my locks, my war. The next morning, November 2nd, Nora Jacobs walked into my office carrying a stack of papers so thick it could have been kindling for a bonfire. Nora doesn't do things halfway. She never has. I trust her because she's been burned before too. She set the stack on the desk with a soft thud. $220,000, she said. I didn't look up. Where? Wire transfer. July 12th, 2017. From the loan account Ethan opened with the forged POA. Recipient Latham Harbor Ops LLC. She flipped to the next page. And here sips another, September 4th, 2017. $90,000. Internal transfer. Shell routing through 2 accounts under Jade Sips Holding Company. I exhaled through my nose. Slow, heavy. The kind of breath a man takes before a sledgehammer swing. Nora pulled a yellow highlighter from behind her ear, circled a section in deliberate strokes. This isn't Septagid making mistakes, she said. This is organized theft. She was right, and I already knew it. I leaned back in my chair, the leather groaning. Turo, I said. Start it. Temporary restraining order. The quiet kind, not the headline kind. Nora nodded once. We'd talked about this weeks ago, hypothetically. Quiet wars require quiet paperwork. She had the templates ready. December 3rd, 2018, 2:17 a.m. The new alarm system tripped. The sound that woke me was sharp and clean. Not the city, not the rain, the security call, the bistro's alarm. I was out of bed in 7 seconds. My boots were already by the door. The drive down King Street felt like a nail tightening with every block. When I pulled up, Luis was already there. He lives 5 minutes away. His flashlight beam swept across the side alley like a blade. The front lock was clean. The alarm panel was lit. But the old outer door, the one Ethan still had a copy of the key to, showed signs of forced entry. Not broken, just tried, and failed. I clicked on my flashlight, shone it down on the lock cylinder. The key marks didn't match the new cut. Whoever came, whoever thought they still owned their way in, found a stranger staring back at them. Luis Esta's voice was low. They didn't get through. I nodded once, but they tried. The camera caught it. The timestamp blinked on the DVR display. 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 6 seconds. A figure in a hoodie. Ethan's build, Ethan's height, gloved hands. Quick retreat when the door held firm. No alarms before, just this one night. That's the thing about thieves. They always assume the locks are still theirs. They forget that a man who builds something also knows exactly how to defend it. The next evening, December 4th, Ethan came to dinner like nothing happened, wearing the same leather jacket he'd had since college, walking with that half-confident, half-guilty swagger. Jade wasn't with him this time. She didn't need to be. Her scent was on every bad decision he'd made. He sat down at the bar. Luis gave me the kind of slow, deliberate look that says everything without a word. The place was quiet. Post-dinner, soft jazz on the speakers, 3 candles still burning at the front tables. Ethan tapped the wood twice. You changed the locks. I wiped the same spot on the counter, slowly, deliberately. You didn't give me a key. That sip's right. His jaw tightened, a small twitch at the corner. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound didn't match his eyes. Dad, what the hell sep's going on? Nothing, I said evenly. Just keeping the place safe. He leaned forward a little too fast. Safe from who? Anyone who doesn't belong here. For just a second, his face slipped, a flicker of something raw, guilt, fear, or both. He masked it quick, but I'd seen it. I built him. I knew every layer of his tells. I grew up here, he said. This place is mine too. I folded the bar towel slowly, set it down flat. No, son. Set's not. He froze. He wasn't expecting me to say it out loud. He was still playing a long con, pretending the storm wasn't coming. You think I don't know what you're doing? I asked. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the weight of every brick in this building. His eyes flickered, not at me, but to the cameras above the bar. Smart boy. Late, but smart. He stood up, forced a laugh. You stir being paranoid. I didn't answer. He walked out slower than he came in. The door clicked behind him, and somewhere very far away, the last piece of who we used to be fell off the wall. December 12th, 2018. January 5th, 2019. Bank freeze served. Claire handled it with the precision of a surgeon. She petitioned the court ex parte, no advance warning, no family showdown. One order, one freeze. Ethan's access to the loan accounts locked down overnight. I remember the exact words Claire used on the call. This isn't about hurting him, Edgar. It's about taking back what it's yours before it's gone. She was right. If I'd waited, Jade would have found another loophole, another transfer, another hole to bleed me through. But now everything they'd taken was sitting in legal concrete. Nora ran the financial lock like a general. I stood in the bistro's back office, my hand on the old wood desk my wife and I bought second-hand when we opened, and felt something shift inside me, not relief, just clarity. The locks weren't set just metal now. They were financial, legal, structural. Every key Ethan once had been melted down to nothing. The night the freeze went through, Luis and I stood outside the bistro. Cold winds swept down King Street. Holiday lights blinked 2 blocks away. Luis sipped from a paper cup of coffee, steam rising between us. They sell no soon, he said. I want them to, I answered. Then what? Then, I said quietly, I let them hang themselves. I looked at the door, at the lock that no longer recognized my son. And for the first time since that poisoned drink, I didn't feel fear. I felt control. The war had shifted. I stepped taken back the walls. Next, I'd take back the ground beneath their feet. Some betrayals scream. Others hide behind a clean invoice. Saturday, January 12th, 2019. Charleston. The afternoon sky had that bruised winter hue, pale blue fading to pewter, like it couldn't decide whether to rain or sleep. Inside the bistro, everything looked normal. Clinking glassware, the hiss of the espresso machine, a couple of tourists taking pictures by the window. But behind the register, a storm was already taking shape. Nora was in my office, hunched over the second-floor printer with a look on her face I hadn't seen in years, tight, focused, almost surgical. She wasn't my accountant in that moment. She was my ally in a war most people didn't even know existed. She held up the paper as it rolled out, crisp and too perfect. Edgar, she said. This renovation invoice, $90,000. Latham Harbor Ops, LLC. Contractor listed as this at LO Tide Renovations. This at address doesn't set exist. I leaned forward, scanned the sheet. Invoice hash LTHM047, dated January 3rd, 2019. Phase 1, Expansion Prep, $90,000. Signed by Ethan Whitlock. But it wasn't just the number, it was the font, the watermark, the fact that it was too clean. Real contractors always leave a fingerprint. They smudge something. This invoice was machine perfect, the kind of perfect only someone faking legitimacy can afford. Nora tapped her pen on the bottom line. Ethan didn't create this. Jade did. She was right. Ethan had the arrogance. Jade had the precision. I didn't call him. I didn't scream. I walked outside, stood by the alley gate, and let the cold air steady me. A few yards away, a man was power washing the sidewalk, the motor growling steady. I watched the water cut a clean line through the dirt, and I thought, that's what this was now. A war of pressure. You don't blast everything at once. You carve. I pulled out my phone and dialed the PI Claire recommended back in October. His name was Mark Redden, retired deputy. Soft voice, mean accuracy. We'd met once. I liked him because he didn't talk too much. Redden, he answered. It sets Whitlock, I said. I said got a $90,000 invoice to a ghost. Text it. I snapped a photo, sent it over. Not a minute later, he replied. Say already on it. That same night, after close, Redden called me from his truck. Your contractor, he said, doesn't exist. The EIN listed belongs to a holding company dissolved in 2015. Address leads to a P.O. box. But here's the kicker. Jade Latham opened a checking account under that LLC name 4 months ago. He didn't have to say the rest. 90 grand wasn't funding construction. It was fueling their escape hatch. Thank you, I said. My voice felt carved out of oak. Keep going. The next week became routine, on the surface. Lunch rush, soft jazz, regulars laughing over shrimp and grits. Underneath I was tightening the screws. January 17th, 2019. Claire drafted a notice of intent to challenge expenditure. January 19th. Nora secured 3 years' worth of contractor logs and matching tax IDs. January 20th. I updated my will with a forfeiture clause explicitly naming Jade Latham. If she or anyone tied to her attempted to profit from the bistro or property through fraud, everything would revert to a trust under my late wife's name. I signed the papers in Claire's office. The notary, a woman named Simone, stamped the bottom corner in deep red. She whispered something I didn't catch, but the sound of that stamp thunk was louder than any gavel. This wasn't set revenge anymore. This was architecture. But for all my planning, war has a way of testing your grip. January 23rd, 2019. I came in early, before sunrise. The bistro was quiet, the air heavy with last night's lemon peel, and the faint scent of bleach. I unlocked the office, reached for the safe, and froze. The combination dial was off by half a turn. Not forced. Not broken, but touched. I spun it open. Inside, the DVR drive, the one with the original footage of Ethan drugging my drink, was gone. A hole opened in my chest so clean it felt surgical. I tore through the office. Nothing else disturbed. Receipts stacked. Invoices untouched. The key to the safe, hidden under the loose floorboard, was still there. Only the DVR was missing. For the first time in months, the war whispered back. He's inside your walls. By 7:13 a.m. Luis and I were in the alley, breathing cold air and rage. Ethan, Luis said. He didn't phrase it as a question. He knew. I clenched my fists, forced my breathing steady. Luis nodded. Panicking people get sloppy. He was right. I'd built this structure to withstand worse than my son's arrogance, but I wasn't going to underestimate him again. 3 hours later, at 10:22 a.m., I spotted it. Ethan's truck, idling at the edge of the staff lot. Trunk cracked open just enough. A soft metal glint caught my eye. I walked out slow, casual, like a man checking delivery logs. He didn't see me at first. The DVR sat in a duffel bag, wrapped in one of my old bar towels. For a second, I thought about how many times that towel had wiped the counter after family dinners, birthday nights, anniversaries. Then I thought about the USB footage inside it, the proof of everything, and how close I'd come to losing it all. I picked it up and slid it under my arm. He'd tried to hide it. He hadn't even taken it apart. He wasn't careful anymore. He was scared. I didn't have to confront him. That's the part people never understand about real revenge. You don't go to war on someone else's timeline. You let them decay in their own silence. I returned the DVR to the safe, changed the combination, sealed the new number into my legal file with Claire's office. This time only she, Nora, and I knew it. Later that night, I sat at the bar long after closing. Only the low hum of the cooler and the overhead lights filled the room. I poured myself a small bourbon, not because I needed it, but because it was ritual, control in a glass. On the counter sat the invoice, the trust papers, and the recovered DVR. My entire war strategy quietly laid out like chess pieces. I whispered to the empty room. You almost got it, son. Almost. The next morning, Nora found me already at the desk, scanning the documents into an encrypted backup. She placed a hand on my shoulder, firm but kind. Edgar, he sips unraveling. I know, I said. Unraveling people make mistakes. That sips the plan. By the end of January, every piece of their fraud was mapped. Ghost contractor exposed. Funds traced. DVR recovered. Legal protections fortified. I had more than evidence. I had leverage. And the cruelest thing about leverage, you don't have to use it right away. You just have to let them feel its weight. The war was no longer quiet defense. It was pressure, and Ethan was starting to crack. He just didn't know how loud the final break would be. There's a silence that only lives between fathers and sons. It doesn't sound like peace. It sounds like glass about to split. Charleston, October 2019. The air had shifted. The kind of fall where the wind carries cinnamon from corner cafes, and the harbor light softens like old gold. From the outside, everything about the bistro looked the same. Jazz at night, couples at the corner tables. But the inside of my life had been split clean down the middle. For months, Ethan and Jade had been living with their trap half-built, not realizing it had already been turned against them. But cracks don't appear all at once. They grow quietly, hairline first, then deep enough to make a sound. It started the second week of October. Tuesday, October 8th, 2019, 5:36 p.m. Dinner rush hadn't started yet. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and white wine, a scent that used to remind me of my wife laughing in her apron. Luis was in the back, double-checking deliveries. Nora was at her desk with a calculator that's louder than a confession, and I was behind the bar, wiping down the surface when the door opened too hard. Ethan stormed in like a man holding the end of a fuse. Jade followed 3 steps behind. She always did, the way a general lets a foot soldier rush the front line first. "Why'd you freeze the money?" Ethan barked. No greeting, no hesitation, just that. Nora's pen paused mid-scratch in the office. Luis leaned out of the kitchen, not moving, just watching. I set the towel down carefully, folding the edge. "Good evening to you, too." His fists were clenched. "Don't sit do that, Dad. Don't sit act. Calm, like I don't sit see what you sit done." "What I sep done?" I asked. "You locked down the accounts," he said. "Every cent." Jade Sip's lawyer says there's Sip's no movement without your signature." "What the hell, Dad?" I tilted my head slightly. "You mean the accounts tied to a forged POA? Or the ones your friend Jade used to funnel money through a ghost company?" His face drained just enough to confirm everything I already knew. That's the thing about liars. They always think they're still ahead of the story. Jade stepped forward then. Sharp red blazer, smile like a blade. "Edgar, this is unnecessary. We could have worked this out privately." "You should have thought of that," I said, "before you wrote fake invoices." For a heartbeat, she blinked. Then she smiled again. Practiced. You have no proof. Louise Sepp's voice came from the kitchen doorway. Steady as brickwork. That Sepp's not true. She turned. She hadn't expected anyone else to speak. I leaned on the counter. Louis Nora, Claire, PI reports. Chain of custody, timestamps, and every penny you two moved. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. My power wasn't volume anymore. It was foundation. Ethan's shoulders stiffened. He looked at Jade. She didn't meet his eyes. Dad, he said finally, his voice cracking in the space between threat and plea. You can set this is my legacy too. This isn't set legacy, I said quietly. This is theft. Later that night, after they left, the bistro was silent. Just me and the ghost of who Ethan used to be. I walked through the dining room slow, my boots soft against the wood. When he was 14, he used to sweep these floors while his mother baked pies in the kitchen. He'd hum to himself, badly. Off-key, beautiful. Now the only thing that hummed was the freezer in the back and the soft buzz of the camera system Luis had installed. My legacy used to be shared. Now it was armored. October 11th, 2019. Nora came into my office with a manila folder. She placed it on my desk without a word. I opened it. A $36,000 invoice. Another fake, same LLC, different date, different shell. But this time it wasn't just the invoice. She'd cross-referenced it with the bank logs and found the timing, 4 separate micro-transfers, spread out over 3 weeks. Quiet theft. Clever, but not clever enough. This is them testing the perimeter, Nora said. I looked at the highlighted rows, every transaction glowing yellow like a flare. They say getting desperate. She nodded. Desperation makes them sloppy. I slid the invoice into my legal binder. That binder had become a war chest, and every document inside was another nail in the coffin. Ethan was building for himself. That same night, I went to the bistro after close, lights off. Only the hum of the cooler and the distant rattle of palmetto leaves outside. I sat at the bar and poured myself 1 glass of bourbon, not for the burn, but for the clarity. And I whispered into the darkness the same way I had a year ago. You built this with me, Ethan. You were supposed to protect it. I could almost hear his 14-year-old voice answering, This place is ours, Dad. But that voice was gone now. Buried under greed and someone else's whisper. October 14. Claire called. She's been monitoring the bank SEP's response to the Tiuro and freeze. They SEP'd her trying to maneuver, she said. Jade SEP's lawyer filed a preliminary objection. Nothing formal yet, but they SEP'd her probing. They wouldn't fit find anything, I said. They don't have to, Claire replied. They just need you to get emotional. That SEP's how people like her win. I let out a long breath. Not this time. She smiled through the line. Good, because they said you're about to make a mistake. October 21st. Ethan showed up again. This time alone. Rain slicked his hair against his forehead. He smelled like the kind of cheap whiskey men drink when they're trying to quiet the truth. He stood in the doorway, staring at the empty dining room. You don't even look at me anymore, he said. I look at you. I answered softly. I just don't recognize you. He laughed once. It was short, sharp. You set your freezing me out. No, I said. You froze yourself out. He looked at the wall, at the brick where his hands had set that first row years ago. I could see the flicker in his eyes, the memory trying to crawl back into his chest. But memories don't fix betrayal. Paper does, locks do, evidence does. He walked out into the rain without another word, and I didn't stop him. October 25th. Nora called me into her office. Claire thinks they make a play soon, she said. She wants you ready. For what? For everything. That night I sat alone in the courtyard. The same courtyard where Ethan had laid that single brick at 14. The rain had washed the air clean, and the string lights glowed softly above me. I whispered to the stone beneath my boots, This place doesn't belong to him anymore. By Halloween, the bistro was packed. Tourists laughing, jazz spinning like silk in the air, but underneath that warmth, everything was different. My son wasn't my partner anymore. He was the man on the other side of the wall, and I knew something was coming. Not in the loud way, in the way old beams groan before they give. The truth about revenge is this: it's not one explosion, it's a steady, methodical cracking of what they built their lie on. And in October 2019, I heard that crack clear as glass under pressure. Ethan wasn't the golden boy anymore. Jade wasn't untouchable. Their plan was showing its seams, and I was just waiting for the right moment to pull the thread. Some betrayals demand a courtroom. Mine needed a table, a warm light, and the sound of a single oven timer. Thursday, November 26, 2020, Thanksgiving night. Charleston had cooled to a soft hush. Palmetto trees rustled along King Street. The bistro windows glowed gold against the dark. Every bulb strung the way my wife used to do it. Perfect, patient, even. That night wasn't meant to be about revenge. It was meant to be about the truth, finally standing on its own 2 feet. The dinner table was set the way she always liked it. Linen folded sharp, glasses chilled, silver catching the low light. Luis had polished the bar earlier. Nora had double-checked the guest list down to the exact seating chart. Claire had rehearsed the legal timing twice. Everything was ready. And, sitting at the center of the table, under a white runner, was a small black portable speaker. Beside it, a manila envelope sealed with a red string. The kind of red string lawyers use when they mean business. Ethan arrived at 6:57 p.m. Right on time. That was always his thing. Control through performance. He came in wearing a pressed shirt, clean shave, playing the role of dutiful son. Jade followed exactly 30 seconds behind him. Red blazer again. The same one she wore the night she tried to smile her way past my locks. That detail didn't escape me. Predators like symmetry. They walked into the warm light like actors hitting their mark. Luis held the door for them, silent. Nora was already at the table. Claire leaned against the far wall, legal pad in hand. I sat at the head of the table. "Dad," Ethan said, flashing that same boyish grin he's set used since he was 16. "Happy Thanksgiving." I didn't smile back. "Take a seat." He hesitated a fraction. Just a sliver. He saw the envelope. He saw Claire. He saw the way Nora's eyes didn't soften the way they used to. Jade tried to fill the silence. "This looks lovely, Edgar." I turned my head just enough to meet her gaze. "Yes, it does." She didn't like that answer. People who rely on charm hate silence more than bullets. We started with soup. My late wife's recipe. Oyster bisque. Light cream, thyme. Ethan used to sneak extra bowls of it when he was 10. I'd let him. That night, his spoon moved slower. My kitchen held too much memory for him to pretend he wasn't sitting on top of a lie. Claire leaned forward slightly, clearing her throat in that subtle way lawyers do when it's almost time to light the fuse. I set my spoon down. "Before we go any further," I said evenly, "I sent like to play something." Ethan stiffened. Jade smiled politely too quickly. Luis walked to the portable speaker, pressed play. The room filled with the sound of my security camera footage. August 31st, 2018. 9:42 p.m. Ethan, standing at the service station, right hand cupped, packet twist, pour, glance. The air in the room changed. You could hear the jazz track from that night faintly in the background of the recording, the same way I'd heard it in real life. But now it echoed off walls packed with people who finally saw it. The audio picked up Louis Sepp's whisper from that night. "He put something inside your juice." Ethan's fork froze midair. Jade stopped breathing for a second. Nora's pen clicked once. Claire didn't move. I watched Ethan's eyes shift, not to me, not to Jade, but to the door. The animal part of him wanted to run. But it was already too late. "This isn't set a courtroom," I said quietly. "This is my table." Ethan swallowed hard. "Dad." I I raised a hand. "Don't stit." Jade forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous. This proves nothing. A packet that could, if it'd been sugar. Anything." Luis didn't flinch. "That packet put a sedative in his drink." Her mouth tightened. Claire stepped forward. Miss Latham, she said calmly, your LLC received $220,000 on July 12, 2017, and another $90,000 in September. Both funds originated from accounts opened under a forged power of attorney during Mr. Whitlock Sepp's medical incapacitation in 2016. Jade turned pale. You have no bank statements, Claire interrupted smoothly. Notarized, affidavit from Southern Trust, and copies of the POA with notary log discrepancies. Nora slid the manila envelope across the table to me. I undid the string and pulled out the documents one by one. Receipts, wire logs, USB stills, chain of custody sheet, Truro. I placed them down like cards in a game I'd already won. Ethan Desta's voice cracked. Then, Dad, just listen to me. I looked at him, really looked. The same face that pressed a brick into wet mortar at 14. The same hands that once held mine in hospital waiting rooms. But now, those hands had forged signatures, opened accounts, helped another person tear at what I built. I listened, I said softly. For 2 years. The timer on the oven dinged clean and sharp. The sound cut through the room like a blade. It was my wife's old holiday timer. She used to set it every Thanksgiving just to remind us the pies were ready. That ding felt like she was still here, watching. I stood slowly. Do you know what this place is, Ethan? He didn't understand. Answer, this isn't set just a restaurant. This is the first brick your mother and I ever laid together. The floorboard under your feet is the same one you sanded down at 16. This isn't set money to me. This is home. Jade shifted uncomfortably. Predators hate when the ground starts remembering who it belongs to. Claire nodded to the back. A uniformed bank administrator stepped forward. A lean man in a charcoal suit. He cleared his throat. Effective this afternoon, based on the filed taro and pending civil action, accounts tied to the forged POA are now under administrative hold. No transfers, no withdrawals. Jade's jaw clenched. Ethan stared blankly at the table. Then came the sheriff's deputy, stepping through the door like a quiet shadow. His badge glinted against the warm light. In his hand, 2 warrants, both signed yesterday. Jade shot to her feet. You can do this. Luis blocked the exit without a word. The deputy Sip's voice was calm, routine. Miss Latham, Mr. Whitlock, Youssef been named in an active financial fraud and conspiracy case. Youssef will receive formal notice and court summons within 72 hours. Ethan didn't look at Jade. Jade didn't look at Ethan. That was the moment the alliance cracked. You can always tell when criminals realize they're not partners, they're liabilities. He whispered then, almost too quiet, Dad, I thought it was mine. I stood over him, every brick in this building holding me up. You thought wrong. And for a long moment, nobody moved. The jazz track that had been playing in the background all night faded out. The bistro was silent again, just like it had been the night this all started. The deputy escorted Jade out first. She kept her head high like a woman still pretending to have cards in her hand. Ethan stayed seated, staring at his untouched plate. I walked to the window and watched the 2 of them disappear down King Street, blue lights washing across the cobblestones. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. Revenge isn't fireworks. It's stillness when the storm finally passes through. Luis walked up beside me. You okay? I exhaled slowly. I seemed steady. Nora started gathering the paperwork, her movements efficient, practiced. Claire checked her watch. The bank administrator handed me his copy of the administrative hold order, and all I could hear was the ding of that timer, echoing softly in my chest. Later, after everyone left, I sat alone at the table. The empty chair where Ethan had sat still carried the weight of 20 years. I reached out, ran my hand across the wood. My wife had chosen this table herself. Said, good wood remembers everything. She was right. Tonight it remembered the night I finally took everything back. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, the good kind, the one I'd been saving. I didn't drink it for victory. I drank it for clarity. This wasn't the end. Trials were coming. Lawyers, courtrooms, headlines. But the war, the one that mattered, was over. I had taken back my table, and he had to watch it happen. There's a strange quiet that comes after a storm you've spent years building toward. It isn't peace. Not yet. It's the echo of everything breaking. Charleston, December 2nd, 2020. A week had passed since the night of the Thanksgiving table. 7 days since the bank hold, the warrant, the whisper that finally shattered Ethan's lie in front of everyone who mattered. The newspapers were already calling it the Whitlock fraud case. They loved that headline. They loved the image of a legacy business turned battlefield. But I didn't care about headlines. I cared about the sound of the lock when I turned the key that morning. It was cold. The kind of crisp winter that sharpens everything. The bistro smelled like cinnamon, roasted pecans, and oak polish. The same scent I used to smell when my wife would hum softly in the kitchen. The windows were still fogged from the night before. Luis had been the last to close up. He always made sure everything felt safe. The front door gave that small, satisfying click as I unlocked it, and for the first time in years I didn't feel like I was letting danger in. The Charleston Gazette headline sat folded on the bar. Local son and partner implicated in $480,000 fraud scheme. A smaller line beneath it, court date pending. Financial freeze in place. No photos of Ethan, no mugshot. Just his name and hers, printed in black and white. Seeing your child's name like that on a page meant for strangers is a pain you can't describe. It isn't the sharp pain of betrayal. It's the dull ache of legacy bleeding out into ink. Luis came in 10 minutes later, a scarf wrapped tight around his neck. He nodded once, like he always does. We've worked together so long we don't need words to understand the shape of a morning. You saw it? He asked. Yeah. He glanced at the paper on the bar, then looked back at me. You did what you had to. I nodded, even though the words didn't feel like comfort. Nora showed up right after. She carried 2 thermoses of coffee, a habit she started after my wife passed. She handed me one without asking. I filed the updated ownership documents with the clerk this morning, she said, sliding an envelope across the counter. And the bank officially removed Ethan Sepp's name from every linked account. Everything Sepp's clean. Clean. That word meant something different now. Not spotless. Not easy. Just mine again. She tilted her head toward the window, where a couple paused to read the posted "closed for private event" sign. You could shut it down, she said softly. Sold the property. Walked away. I could have, I said. But you didn't sut. No, I answered. I built this place with my hands. I set not giving it away because someone tried to steal it. She smiled then. It wasn't set pity. It was respect. That afternoon, Claire came by with a thin file. The sound of her heels on the wood floor was sharp and deliberate. She's never been one to waste time. She sat across from me at the table where it all went down. Jade's legal team is trying to negotiate, she said. Negotiate what? Reduction. Restitution. She sips already flipped on Ethan. That hit me like a quiet gust of cold wind. I knew it would happen. I'd seen the way she'd looked at him when the deputy walked in. But hearing it was different. She said he'll give them everything, Claire continued. Emails, text messages, bank routing instructions. She said was trying to get a deal. I stared at the grain of the wood on the table. The same table my wife picked out 20 years ago. I'd sanded it myself. Sealed it twice. It survived hurricanes, renovations, fights, and laughter. Now it held the echoes of betrayal and the slow rebuild. She still save herself, I said. Claire nodded. She still try. I let the silence stretch a little too long. Then I asked, and Ethan? Not a word yet. I clenched my jaw. Not out of rage. Out of something older, something heavier. When Claire left, I walked out onto the courtyard. The winter light had that soft amber hue, the kind that makes brick look like memory. I ran my fingers over the first row of bricks Ethan and I laid back in 2002. His hands were so small back then, steady, full of hope. The wind rustled through the string lights overhead. If I closed my eyes, I could still hear my wife Sit's laugh. I could still hear Ethan Sit's voice at 14 saying, "This place is ours, Dad." But it wasn't set ours anymore. It was mine. Because he set given it away. December 10th. We reopened quietly. No press, no announcements, just the regulars. Luis manned the door. Nora handled the books. I poured drinks. A woman at the bar, new young, asked me, "Why does this place feel so warm?" I smiled softly. Because every inch of it was fought for. She didn't understand the weight of those words, but she smiled back anyway. Some wars end with silence. Some end with laughter in the corner booth. That night, when we closed, Luis stayed late. He wiped down the bar top in slow, even circles, just the way I taught him. Nora locked up the register, humming under her breath. For the first time in a long time, the air didn't feel like it was holding its breath. I stood in the doorway, hand on the frame, looking out onto King Street. The world was moving again. But inside my walls, the storm had passed. Luis flicked off the lights. The bistro went dark except for the faint glow from the courtyard lantern. I ran my hand along the wood of the bar, smooth, worn, alive. "This place is solid again," I whispered. Luis heard me, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded once, like a man who'd helped build something that mattered. In war, there's always a moment when the sound fades, and you realize you're still standing. This was mine. The locks were mine again. The accounts, the bricks, and for the first time in years, the silence inside this place didn't sound like fear. It sounded like home. Justice doesn't sound like gavel strikes or cheers. It sounds like paper shuffling in a quiet courtroom. November 30th, 2020. Charleston County Courthouse. The sky outside was overcast, the kind of pale gray that turns every street into a muted photograph. When I stepped out of the truck that morning, the air was cold enough to bite. Luis walked beside me, his steps measured, steady. He wasn't required to be there, but some people stand next to you not because they have to, but because they know where the battle began. The courthouse doors loomed tall, columns streaked with years of rain. I've passed this building dozens of times in my life, always as a citizen, never as a father waiting to watch his son stand before a judge. Inside, the hallways smelled like disinfectant and paper. Every sound carried heels, murmurs, the rustle of case files. I'd spent years preparing for this, but no amount of legal prep or quiet war can soften the sight of your child's name at the top of a criminal docket. State of South Carolina, Faith Ray Whitlock and Jade Latham. Charges: forgery, wire fraud, conspiracy, financial exploitation. That was the name I gave him. The same name his mother whispered over a crib in 1988. And now it sat on a sheet of paper under the word V. The arraignment was formal, clinical. Ethan walked in wearing a gray suit, not the boyish grin, not the pocky son who thought locks didn't matter, just pale skin and stiff shoulders. Jade wasn't beside him. She'd already flipped. Her lawyer had cut a deal, the kind that lets people like her talk fast enough to save their own skin. I watched him from the second row. Claire sat on my right, pen balanced between two fingers. Luis sat to my left, hat in his hands. No one said a word. The clerk read the charges aloud. Ethan stood, hands folded in front of him. When the judge asked for his plea, his voice was almost too soft to hear. Not guilty. Not surprised. I'd expected that. Guilty men rarely announce it at the first bell. The judge set a trial date for August 2021. 8 months. 8 months. 8 months of headlines, motions, subpoenas. But that wasn't a burden to me. That was structure. And I'd spent a lifetime building structures that outlast storms. Spring 2021. The pretrial motions began. Paperwork, hearings, back and forths between attorneys. I didn't attend every one, but I was there when it mattered. I wanted to see the way he'd look at me, if he'd look at me at all. He didn't set. Not once. Jade, on the other hand, turned into a fountain of cooperation. She handed over everything: emails, texts, bank routing slips, witness statements. I saw the transcripts. I saw her handwriting on those forged invoices. She'd traded her loyalty for a lighter sentence. She was never in love with him. She was in love with the property. August 9th, 2021. The trial opened with quiet efficiency. The courtroom was cool. ceiling fans humming softly. My name wasn't on the stand that morning. It was on the evidence. POA records, toxicology, chain of custody logs, bank logs. It was a story told through paper and timestamps. The state laid it out cleanly. Forged POA March 2016 while I was intubated. Wire transfers 2017, $220,000 and $90,000. Invoice fraud 2019, $36,000. Attempted tampering January 2019, DVR theft. Administration hold and warrants November 2020. Claire whispered once during the proceedings, "They can't spin numbers, Edgar." And she was right. Greed may be loud, but numbers stay quiet and unmovable. The prosecution called witnesses. Nora was first. She wore her best black blazer. Steady as steel. I'd seen her in storms before. She walked through her testimony like a woman who'd spent years balancing ledgers while watching men try to lie to her face. She laid out the forged loan, the Tarot, the bank freeze, every penny traced. Ethan didn't look at her. Luis was next. When he described whispering those 8 words that night, he put something inside your juice. The entire courtroom went silent. You could feel the shift. There's something about hearing betrayal from someone who's never lied in his life. Then came the forensic tech, the toxicology report, the notarized timestamps, all the little pieces I'd spent years locking in place. Jade took the stand under cooperation terms. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She simply told the truth the way opportunists do when their own skin's on the line. She admitted the fake invoices, the laundering, the manipulation. When asked if Ethan was aware of the fraud, she said clear and unbroken, yes, from the start. Ethan's jaw clenched so tight the bailiff shifted forward a little. Then it was my turn. I raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth, walked to the stand, sat down. The wood under me felt solid, heavier than anything I'd built with concrete. The prosecutor asked me to describe the night of August 31st, 2018. I told them everything. The jazz, the packet, Luis's whisper. The freezer, the tamper bag, the drive home with that glass beside me, every bump in the road cracking something inside my chest. I watched Ethan the whole time. I wanted him to see that I wasn't just building a case. I was remembering September 2nd, 2021. The verdict came down after 5 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, forgery, conspiracy, attempted evidence tampering. I didn't cheer. No one did. That's the thing about justice. It doesn't roar, it exhales. Jade's deal gave her a reduced sentence and mandatory restitution. Ethan didn't get the same mercy. October 15th, 2021. The courtroom was half full. Some curious strangers, some journalists, a few locals who'd eaten at the bistro for 20 years. They all watched as Judge Hargrove delivered the sentence like she was laying bricks one by one. Restitution, property relinquishment, and time. When she said the number, Ethan didn't flinch. He just stared at the floor. That's what guilt looks like when it stops pretending to be clever. I walked out of the courthouse alone. The cold air hit my face like a clean wind after a storm. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. Luis met me at the truck. "It's done?" he asked. "It's set's done." Nora texted me 15 minutes later. "The bistro is yours, official, uncontested." I sat behind the wheel and stared at the courthouse steps. A father never dreams of this day, not even in nightmares. But justice isn't about dreams, it's about lines finally drawn where they should have been years ago. The sun was setting behind the courthouse dome, bleeding light across the parking lot. November light, clean, cold, final. And for the first time since that whisper in 2018, I didn't feel like a man defending a wall. I felt like a man standing on solid ground again. Some endings don't arrive with a bang. They settle in quietly like a brick finally finding its place in the wall. Charleston, December 23rd, 2021. The city had put on its winter coat. Holiday garlands wrapped every lamppost on King Street. The storefronts were warm against the cold. the air heavy with cinnamon and roasted chestnuts from the corner vendors. And there I was, standing at the front of the bistro with my hand on the door, feeling the wood grain under my palm like it was the skin of something alive. It was the first Christmas in years where I wasn't fighting a war. Inside, the bistro smelled like pine, butter, and a hint of bourbon. Luis had insisted on adding cedar sprigs above the bar. Nora hung garlands around the window frames. Claire sent over a small wreath, plain and elegant, with a note that said simply, "You built this, keep it." On the wall near the entrance, framed in soft light, was the photograph of my wife. She's laughing, flower on her cheek, hand resting on 14-year-old Ethan's shoulder. He's holding a trowel too big for him, standing over the first row of bricks we laid. That photograph used to break me. Now it steadied me. I came in early that day before anyone else. The courtyard was still damp from last night's rain. The string lights swayed gently overhead, catching the faint morning light. I walked over to the corner of the courtyard. Our corner, the one where Ethan pressed that last brick into place in 2002. I knelt down, brushing a thin line of winter dust off the surface. It wasn't a perfect brick. It was a little crooked. His hands were small back then, but it was real, and it was still here. I whispered softly, "You didn't take this." For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. Louise showed up around 8:30, carrying 2 trays of sweet rolls from the bakery down the street. "Merry early Christmas," he said, voice warm and steady. He's not the type to say a lot, but when he does, it lands. He looked at me crouched by the brick. "You talkin' set to it again?" I smiled faintly. "Yeah." "Good," he said. "It listens." Nora came in 15 minutes later with a thermos of coffee and her usual stack of folders. But for once there were no legal filings inside, no TROs, no forensic breakdowns. Just payroll reports and holiday bonuses. "You know," she said, leaning against the counter, "you could have sold this place after the trial. You would have gotten a fortune." I looked around at the bar, the polished wood, the framed receipts from opening day. "I didn't build this place to sell it." She smiled. "Good, because it feels different now. Lighter." She was right. It did. That afternoon, as the staff finished decorating for the holiday rush, I set up my recording mic behind the bar. It wasn't for evidence this time. No chain of custody. No timestamps. Just me, speaking to whoever might be listening somewhere out there. People who'd been through their own wars. People who understood. I cleared my throat once and started recording. "My name's Seps Edgar Whitlock," I said, my voice steady. "Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you Seps were listening from." A small laugh escaped me. It felt strange to say that line after everything. "This isn't said a story about money," I continued softly. "It's said as a story about a promise. 20 years ago, my wife and I laid the first brick of this bistro together. My son set the last one. We believed in what we were building, and for a long time I thought that was enough." I paused. The soft hum of the bar cooler filled the space. "It wasn't set, because trust isn't set what you build once. It sets what you defend, day after day. And when someone decides to burn that bridge, you don't give them the house to go with it." I let the silence hang, then continued. "I spent years gathering receipts, bank slips, legal filings, and the night he thought he was taking everything, I took it back. Not through violence, not through shouting, but through proof. I reached down, ran my hand across the edge of the bar. And here's sips what I learned. Sometimes the last brick you set is an est made of mortar, it an est's made of resolve." By evening, the restaurant was full. Locals, regulars, tourists wandering in from the cold. The jazz band I'd hired for the holidays started their first set, a soft, low version of "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." It filled the room with warmth. Luis moved through the tables with quiet ease. Nora kept the register humming. The laughter in the air didn't feel forced anymore. It was ours again. I poured drinks behind the bar, the way I did on opening night in 2002. My hands were older now, a little slower, but steadier, stronger. And when I looked up, I didn't see Ethan at the door. I saw the life entry built without him, sometime around 9 p.m. I walked back into the courtyard. The lights swayed overhead. The brick shone faintly under the lantern. I knelt down again and pressed my palm against the cold surface. It didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like foundation. I whispered softly, "You didn't set lose me, Ethan. You gave me away." The wind moved through the alley like a quiet sigh, and I swear, just for a second, I could hear my wife's laugh echo against the wall, that warm, low sound she made when everything still felt whole. Later that night, after closing, Luis and Nora stood by the door while I locked up. The key turned smooth. The alarm blinked steady. This place was mine again. Not just legally, not just financially, spiritually. The walls had been bruised, but they held. Luis gave me a small nod. "We did it." Nora echoed him softly. "Yeah, we did." I walked to the center of the bistro, looked around one last time before the lights went out. This wasn't the same place Ethan tried to steal. This was something new, something forged in the quiet heat of justice. I whispered to the walls, "Good wood remembers everything." And then I turned off the lights. The hardest part of any storm isn't when it's raging. It's the quiet that follows. The moment when everything is still and you have to face what's left standing. Spring 2022. Charleston was stretching awake after a winter that felt longer than most. The azaleas were starting to bloom again, painting the streets with streaks of soft pink and white. The air was warm enough to smell the salt drifting in from the harbor, and for the first time in a long, long time, my life didn't revolve around depositions, subpoenas, or court dates. The war was over, and the walls were still standing. I unlocked the bistro's front door just past 7 in the morning. The key slid smoothly. No resistance, no lingering dread, just the clean click of a lock that belonged only to me. Inside, the sunlight fell through the front windows, laying soft rectangles of gold across the polished wood floor. Dust motes drifted through the beams, slow and lazy like the building itself was exhaling after years of holding its breath. Louise was already in the kitchen, whistling something old and familiar. I think it was a jazz tune from the early 90s. He'd never admit it, but I caught him doing that whenever he was in a good mood. He was stirring a pot of spiced cider, the same recipe we used during winter service, but now he added a hint of lemon, his little spring ritual. "Mornin', Dest," he said without turning around. "Morning. You sleep?" "Better than I used to." He laughed softly, and for a second, it sounded like a time before everything fell apart. Nora arrived not long after, her tote bag swinging with its usual collection of folders and receipts. But lately, they weren't court documents or bank freeze confirmations. They were just numbers, ordinary, boring, good numbers. Payroll SIPs balanced, inventory SIPs clean, and the new tax structure SIPs kicking in next month, she said, hanging her jacket on the back of a chair. "We SIPs solid, Edgar. Really solid." It's funny how the word solid can mean so many things. A year ago I heard it as a defense. Now I heard it as a foundation. The letters started coming around late January. Neat envelopes, familiar handwriting, Ethan. The first one said, "Dad, I know you don't want to hear from me, but please read this." I didn't. I folded it neatly and slid it into a drawer beneath the bar. The second arrived 2 weeks later. Then a third. They came like clockwork. Every other Thursday, apologies written in careful ink, words strung together like someone trying to patch a hole in a wall that had already been rebuilt. I didn't burn them. I didn't throw them away. I just didn't open them. You see, forgiveness isn't owed, it's earned. And some bridges can't be rebuilt with ink. In March, I walked down to the Charleston pier one morning before opening. The sun was still low, painting the harbor in gold. It smelled like brine and coffee from the cart near the water's edge. I sat on the same bench I used to take Ethan to when he was a boy. We'd watched the boats together, him pointing at every single one like each was an adventure waiting to happen. Back then, I thought legacy meant giving him everything. Now, I know legacy means protecting what you built, even from the people you love. I pulled the first letter out of my jacket pocket. Still sealed, the edges worn from weeks of being carried but never opened. I stared at it for a long time before tucking it back. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. Back at the bistro, business was steady. Not explosive, not glamorous, just steady. And steady is good. It's honest. Luis took over managing nights. He moved through the floor like a captain who knew every knot in the ship. Nora handled the books, humming old soul tunes under her breath. Claire remained on retainer, though these days she came by less with files and more with pastries from a French bakery she loved. The courtyard filled with laughter again. Not forced, not brittle, real laughter. A young couple sat at the corner table one Friday evening, holding hands across the candlelight. They asked if the place had always been this warm. I smiled when I told them. It wasn't it always easy, but yes, it dis always been warm. They didn't know the weight of that sentence, but I did. I found myself at the Brick again one evening in early April, the last one Ethan set when he was 14. I crouched down, brushed away a faint layer of pollen, and pressed my palm against it. The surface was warm from the day's sun. For years that brick had been a wound, a reminder of a promise broken. Now it felt different. It felt like the base of something rebuilt alone but still standing. You didn't set lose me, I whispered softly. You let go. The courtyard was quiet, except for the faint rustle of the jasmine vines overhead. The air carried the scent of spring, not the heavy, humid Charleston summer, not the sharp chill of betrayal, just spring. Luis flicked off the lights inside, leaving the courtyard lanterns glowing. He stepped out with a rag over his shoulder. You're doing that thing again, he said. What thing? Talking to the brick. I chuckled. Maybe it needs to hear it. He nodded once. The way he always does when he understands something without needing to say a word. It listens. I stood there a little longer after he went back inside. For years my life had revolved around fighting back, holding the line, gathering evidence, making sure every paper was stamped and every key turned the right lock. Now all of that had settled. The walls weren't shaking anymore. The bistro wasn't set a battlefield. It was home. And as the lantern light glowed against the old brick, I realized something I hadn't said out loud in years. I was happy. Not the loud kind. Not the cinematic kind. The quiet, earned kind. The kind that settles into your bones like warm light. The kind that means the storm is finally over. Legacy isn't loud. It doesn't scream its presence. It just waits quietly under everything, like a foundation. Charleston, June 5th, 2022. The morning heat hadn't arrived yet. The streets were painted gold by the early sun, and the harbor breeze still carried that faint, briny coolness that vanishes by noon. I arrived at the bistro just before opening, the same way I had for 20 years. My hands brushed the smooth grain of the door. I turned the key and the lock gave its familiar click. That sound had once felt like armor. Now it felt like home. Inside, the light streamed through the tall front windows, falling over every table, every groove in the floor, every picture frame on the wall. The one with my wife's laugh. The one with 14-year-old Ethan and the crooked brick. For years, those pictures felt like reminders of what I'd lost. But that morning, they felt like reminders of what had survived. Luis was already in the kitchen, whistling his usual tune, same as he did every day. It had become a sort of ritual, not a grand one. Just quiet proof that some things don't break when everything else does. Morning, he said. Morning. He looked at me the way only someone who stood in the trenches with you can look. He didn't need to say anything else. We've had years of words between us. Now silence is enough. Nora arrived 5 minutes later, hair pulled back, coffee thermos in hand. She flipped through her folder, steady numbers. Good numbers, the kind that don't carry court dates or TRO filings behind them. Tax season didn't kill us, she said with a grin. Miracle. It's sense, not a miracle, I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. It's sense what happens when thieves aren't sent attached to your name anymore. She laughed, soft and light. True. A few letters still came from Ethan. Fewer now, the edges were worn, some corners smudged from handling. I kept them in the same drawer beneath the bar. I still hadn't opened them. I don't know if I ever will. People ask me if I forgive him. But forgiveness isn't a door someone else can knock on. It's a room only I can enter, and I haven't opened that door, not yet. Maybe not ever. Some scars are meant to stay visible. Business was good. Honest, nothing flashy. I liked it that way. The tourists came and went. The regulars stayed, and every night the jazz band filled the room with a low hum that stitched everything together like a steady heartbeat. One afternoon, a young man and woman came in, barely in their 20s, holding hands like the world was still soft and clean. They sat near the window, ordered one coffee and two slices of pie. I heard the woman say softly, "This place feels like it has stories." She was right. It did. Every inch of this bistro had a story carved into it. Every lock, every table, every brick. But I didn't correct her or offer an explanation. Some stories don't need to be told, they need to be felt. Luis leaned on the counter next to me and said, "She sips not wrong." "No," I replied, "she sips not." That evening, after closing, I walked back out to the courtyard. It had become a ritual of mine, my way of talking to the past without letting it consume me. The jasmine was in full bloom, its scent soft and thick in the warm night air. String lights stretched overhead, casting a golden net over the old bricks. I knelt down at the same corner, brushing my fingers over the last brick Ethan set. It had survived storms, betrayal, court battles, and years of quiet rot. And yet it hadn't moved. Foundations don't lie. "I kept it," I whispered. "But I didn't set keep you." There was no bitterness in the words anymore, just truth. Claire stopped by that night, long after the last table had cleared. She leaned against the doorframe, still in her crisp suit, even off the clock. "Yusef got a good thing here, Edgar," she said. "A clean thing. It wasn't set always clean." She raised an eyebrow. "But it is now." I nodded. She wasn't the sentimental type, but I could tell she respected the quiet victory more than any loud one. She'd seen too many people lose everything before they realized what they were standing on. "You know," she said, glancing at the brick path, "most people don't set make it to the other side of something like this." I smiled. "I didn't set make it through because I set 'em special. I made it because I built the damn floor." She laughed, sharp and real. Then she tipped her chin once and left. Later, when the lights were out and the night hummed softly through the open alley, I sat at the bar with a glass of bourbon, no ice. Just the quiet burn. I thought about my wife, about the photograph on the wall, about 14-year-old Ethan with his steady little hands pressing that brick into wet mortar, whispering, "This place is ours, Dad." And then about the whisper that undid it all years later. "He put something inside your juice?" The story didn't end at that whisper. It began there. I don't believe in perfect endings. I believe in steady ground. And as I looked around the bistro that night, I realized that's exactly what I'd built again. A life without the rot. A business without thieves hiding in my own bloodline. A legacy that wasn't stolen. I raised the glass to the empty room and whispered, "For the ones who build and don't scent, give it away." The air carried it softly toward the courtyard. I've learned something through all of this. You can spend a lifetime building something brick by brick, dollar by dollar, promise by promise. And sometimes the person you love most will still try to take it from you. But if your foundation is solid, you can take it back. Not out of vengeance, out of truth. People like Jade believe in profit. People like Ethan believe in inheritance. But I believe in what you build with your hands. The night ended the way it began. Quiet, steady, solid. I turned off the lights one by one, locked the door, and stood on the sidewalk looking up at the sign above the bistro. The wood was worn, the lettering faded in some places, but it still read, "Whitlock Bistro, Estelle." I smiled to myself. Not because I'd won, because I'd endured. I walked away from the door with the sound of the lock settling behind me. Not as armor, not as a warning, but as proof that what I'd built was still here. And sometimes, that sip's all the justice you need.